You're listening to the Just Go Bike podcast. We're all about the culture of bicycling just for the fun of it. Your host, Kathy Murphy from the Morphology podcast and Andrea Parrott from ParrotTalk are joined by a wide variety of guests each week that delve into the social side of cycling. With tales from RAGBRAI Nation, come for the bikes, stay for the fun, and leave with a smile. And now, here are your hosts, Murph.
Hey, that's me.
And AP.
And that's me. Hey, this is AP, and that's right, because it's me. That means this is ParrotTalk. And today, I have a very special guest for you that you may find familiar. Special guest, want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
That's right, it's Murph. I got Murph on for a very special ParrotTalk episode today, recapping the PreRide 2024. I wanted to give you all listeners a feel for what the bike ride across Iowa was like for me. And since Murph was there too, I thought it was a no-brainer to have us both on the episode today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on ParrotTalk. And, you know, talking about bikes is our jam. So, and listeners, of course, if you haven't listened yet, be sure to listen to our daily recap episodes because we were raw at the time. We had just gotten done biking, so we gave a lot of information at that time.
Yeah, that's right. One of my family members said that I sounded very enthusiastic on the podcast, and I feel like I faked it till I maked it on that one. So thank you, and you're welcome on that. But does it feel a little bit weird to be on ParrotTalk, or does it feel like you've come home finally?
Well, to be honest, it feels just like a normal episode between me and you. But I mean, it is ParrotTalk, so
that's right.
You're running the show here, I guess.
That's right. So we'll talk about our pre-ride recap, and I want to include a couple extra training tips because that's what makes ParrotTalk ParrotTalk.
All right. Well, great idea. And hopefully listeners have been listening to the weekly training tips that we sprinkle into each episode. I've done a couple about hill climbing, but of course, the more tips, the better, right?
That's absolutely right. Because, we want you to be prepared as possible for this. So let's start off by admitting to the world how much training I've done before pre-ride.
Uh-oh, here we go.
I know it was less than you. This is the most that I've ever trained for any pre-ride. I trained about 500 miles. I started in this November and then into December and on through the winter on my trainer and then went outside as much as possible. Listener, remember, I have to train for pre-ride while it's cold outside majority of the time. So I'm mostly just guesstimating trainer miles that I put in. I've also had now say 25, 26 years of riding RAGBRAI. So bike muscle does accumulate. I wasn't starting from zero on this. I also do a lot of cross training where I do a lot of dog walking and gardening and like golfing and other sports that all contribute to this. It's not just the plain and simple 500 miles. So, I think
you need to qualify. I mean, you do aggressive dog walking because not only do you walk one dog, then you walk a second dog, and both of them are full of energy. So
yes,
you're more like a power dog walker, I guess you could say.
Oh, power walker. Yeah, I hold my own with those mall walkers. We walk maybe 3 to 5 miles per day with the dogs. So I do walk a lot.
Yeah.
And I like it.
So with all that said, about 500 miles of training started in November. We did the pre-ride the first week of June. How did you feel?
I wish I would have had more hill training. And that's sort of the reason why I wanted to do this episode today, because while I did have quite a few miles under my belt, there were a lot of on paths and trails. And you can see that if you look me up in Map My Ride or Ride with GPS, you can see that. I had mostly flat training on paths. So enough about me though. How about you? What have you done what did you do to train for pre-ride, and did you feel like it was enough?
To be honest, I never feel like I have enough training. But with that said, I was definitely tired every day. And, we didn't sleep a whole lot during pre-ride, but I was never super sore. So if you take that as the point to think about, I think I was pretty prepared. I also do lots of workouts through the winter, and I use It's like a virtual, we've talked about it before, called Zwift. I also trained for that gravel camp that I did in Minnesota, which was incredibly large hills that we did. I had about 2,000 miles of riding before pre-ride, which I think it's maybe, with the exception of the year that I rode across America, it's kind of standard for me. Not all of those miles are like truly workout miles. A lot of them are just social ride miles, but
Sure.
it was definitely time in the saddle. So, yeah, I think I was pretty prepared. I didn't feel like, I mean, I know we're going to get deeper into hills in a second here, but I didn't feel like the hills were like as hard as I thought they would be.
You know, I kind of felt the same way. I was kind of slow, whereas Murph was as fast as the wind. She passed. I would immediately start by passing her on every hill, and then she would pass me every time towards the top, and then keep going. So, you know, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But if you would like we are kind of getting down to the wire as far as getting close to RAGBRAI. We're under 50 days now, but it's never too late to look at Coach Ertl's cycling training blogs that we have on the RAGBRAI.com website. If you'd like advice from someone who really trains cyclists and has real advice about how to train, I'm sure he would be horrified to find out how many miles I trained for this RAGBRAI.
But it's true. I mean, you know, we are down to the line, but it's never too late. So
That's right.
if you are listening to this podcast in the middle of June, you still have time. So
I would say, having done the pre-ride, if I was going to ride RAGBRAI like you are, I would go out today and ride some hills just to prepare, even though I've already done all the hills of RAGBRAI, just to get a couple more. And in fact, I think the next topic we should talk about is the hills themselves. Let's talk about preparing for them because, a flat RAGBRAI is a flat RAGBRAI, but this is a whole different beast.
Yeah. And you said, you would start training. You would go out today and climb the hills. And just on a side note, here in Iowa today, there's a heat advisory. So in theory, it actually would be a good day to, maybe don't go out and do 80 miles, but like pick the days that are a little bit uncomfortable. So anyway, but let's get into your thoughts, your tips on hill training.
Yeah. And this is just my advice based on experience. It's not necessarily what will work for everyone, but maybe keep it in mind if you haven't had a lot of experience with hills, you might as well try what's worked for someone else while you're figuring out your own style. So my favorite tip, or one of my favorite tips, is that when you're climbing up a hill, eventually when you get towards the top, you can usually feel that the hill gives way a little bit and the grade flattens out just ever so slightly. At that point, don't shift into a harder gear yet. Give yourself just a couple easy spins with that easier gear to kind of have a little tiny micro recovery and give yourself a leg up as you push towards the top. Then once you've given that couple of spins on that easier gear, switch into a harder gear and start cranking all the way up that hill just to, as you reach the summit. But I like to give myself a little tiny micro break.
I'm going to give a shout out to Jeff Southard. I don't know if he listens to this podcast. If he doesn't, he should. A friend of mine. And he told me that when you're getting really tired, like he was referring to racing, but even if you're not on a hill, like just exactly what you just said, AP, shift into easier gear, let yourself spin with your pedals. You're not doing it, grinding those gears. You're just spin, and it kind of gives you a little bit of recovery. So you're spot on with what Jeff said to me one time.
Yeah, and I will say on the bikes, Murph and I have the same bike, and with our experience, we were topped out on our easiest gear on many of the hills.
Yeah.
So just get comfortable riding in that gear. And as someone who is a recovering person who used to ride in the hardest gear possible at all times, sometimes it feels weird to spin, but just sort of lean into it, allow yourself to spin a little bit. I mean, within reason, but it is actually easier, which is, to me, it sounds weird to say, but it is easier and it will help you. So, all right. So again, if you're grinding up that same hill, and this is something I have given as a tip on this podcast before, but I'm going to say it again because sometimes we have new listeners. I'm crawling up a hill. It's uncomfortably slow. I would like to think about anything else. I will look ahead at something maybe 50 yards on the horizon, and I'll pretend that I have a cowgirl lasso, and I've lassoed something with a tow rope.
Ooh.
And then you pretend that I'm pedal by pedal pulling myself up the hill with that tow rope. And just something about that mental visualization really helps me distract myself from all the pain. And it gives me just a little small goal to hit, and then make another goal, and then hit that goal. And as soon as you know it, you're up at the top of the hill. If I look at the top of the hill from the bottom, I will just give up right then and there. So that's
and then when you get to
me.
the top, and then when you get to the top, do you do some sort of like cowgirl Yahoo or something?
I say, yeah.
Wait, in your head or out loud?
Oh, I think it's a mixed bag.
I'm going to be listening for that next time.
Yeah. Yep. So, that's one of my favorite things I do to get me up a hill. Do you have anything to add to that one?
I've never thought of it that way. What I sometimes do is I will look closer to the front of my wheel and visualize that it's actually flat.
Oh,
so
okay.
I won't look at the top of the hill, and I'm not being unsafe. I can still see the pavement. I can still see the rider in front of me, but I'll just look forward and just be, you can't really see the hill when you're just looking down at the pavement and a little bit in front of your wheel. So that helps me, even though I might be, pedaling, harder, or it's obvious I know I'm on a hill. It just gives me that little bit of a push of like, oh, it's not really that steep. So I'm going to keep going.
That's a good one. I had never thought of that. I really like that. I'll try that next time.
Yeah.
When I'm riding. Really, though, the number one way to get better at hills is just to ride more hills, like I'd said before. And the second best way to get better at hills is just to ride as much as possible. So, keep that in mind as we're giving all these tips. Earlier, I kind of referenced you can go in and look at my Ride with GPS files to see how I trained and how I wish I would have trained. But you can use a Wahoo or another cycling computer. It really does help accurately track how many hills you've ridden and how difficult they truly are, that you can then compare to Murph and my and the rest of the team's Ride with GPS files and just kind of see where you stack up to our abilities. We had a wide variety of abilities on the PreRide. People who were far faster than us and some people who were slower than us. Although I'm towards the slower end of the spectrum because I didn't do enough hills. But it can be a really nice way to sort of gauge where you're at if you're into that kind of techie stuff.
I thoroughly, this was my first time using the Wahoo cycling computer, and we inputted the routes. So the computer knew where we were going. So it was kind of a turn-by-turn direction. But I actually, first I hated it, then I loved it when it would say, you are climbing 2 of 16 hills or, 12 of 16 hills. Like at first I was all like, oh my gosh, do I really want to know? Yeah. But as the days went on, I really enjoyed that because I could be like, you know what? We're at the lunch town and we are over half done with these hills.
Yeah. I think it gets really addicting. And there are several days on the ride, especially those longer days, where we'll conquer a good third of the hills in the first 10 or 15 miles, or at least that's what it felt like. I don't know. Math's not my strong suit. Do not hold me to that. But we had conquered quite a few hills early in the day, and it really helped me mentally.
Yep.
As I had said earlier, I've just sort of getting used to using my Wahoo computer over the last couple of years, and I just got that Wahoo cadence meter, and it really helps me with my pace as I go up the hill. I can make sure if you aren't familiar with a cadence meter, it measures how many times per minute that your wheel spins or your foot goes around in a circle, I think is more accurate way to say that. And you should be trying for a certain number of spins per minute. For me, it's supposed to be between 90 and 95 for really elite riders. I like to hit 85 if I can, spins per minute. And that really helps me as I'm going up the hill to keep a goal in mind. Am I spinning fast enough? Am I doing this right? It just sort of helps in it. I feel like it has made me faster overall to pay attention to.
And it also helps you decide when to go to a different gear.
Yes.
Because if you are shooting for that 85 and you look down and you're going 60 RPMs, then you know that you're in too hard of a gear.
You need to shift down. Yeah. This all goes into the thing where I was talking about, I used to ride in too high of a gear. It would hurt my knees and I would be going slower than I really should. My monkey brain thinks hard gear, go fast, but it's actually not the way that cycling works with the ratios and the dynamics of your gears. So that being said, don't worry about how fast or slow you're going up a hill. Climb at your own pace. I think every pedal gets me another step towards the top of that hill. Every pedal is progress. And I would a million times rather be riding up the hill than walking. So every pedal is one step that I don't have to take. And that's how I think about it when I get truly desperate.
And I would say I would much rather be doing all of those hills than like sitting in an office working.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
Let's have fun on RAGBRAI, but
yeah, it's another step toward, or another pedal towards going downhill as well. So in all the towns where you're going to have fun and all that. So just try to keep a light attitude while you're doing it, which is easier said than done. Here I am sitting at my desk. Much easier said, but I think we managed to have a good time doing it. But
for sure, yeah. And you know how you kind of keep an eye on your cadence while you're pedaling, especially on those hills. I do the same thing, but with my heart rate.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
like for me, if my heart rate goes into, like the red zone, which everybody's different, right? So I'm not even going to tell you my numbers because it doesn't matter because you're not me and it doesn't make sense. But when my heart rate starts getting really high, I know that I'm pushing myself too far. So that's when regardless of how fast I think I should be going, I just slow down because, and I also do breathing and I just okay, calm yourself down. You're not, you don't want your body to be in a fight or flight mode, just calm down, get yourself up the hill, coast down the next one, take a drink of water, all that good stuff. So, so we have similar thought processes, but we use different tools.
That's right. Yeah. So whatever it takes to get there. One training tip that I took from Coach Ertl's blog that I really liked, kind of on that same line, where he said that when you're training, you want to train a little bit harder than you're used to riding. So if you have a bike computer, and you'll probably know what your average mile per hour speed is that you usually ride at. Let's say it is 15 miles an hour. Total, it could be anything if you're a rider. It could be 10, it could be 20. Just depends on you as a rider. But just try to go for your whole ride doing 1 mile per hour more than what you normally do. So you'll be stretching yourself, you'll be feeling a little uncomfortable, but it will help you get into better shape than your status quo. If you're not comfortable doing that, try climbing your gear or try climbing a hill in one gear harder than what you normally do. You can go back to normal after that hill, but just try doing it a little bit in hard mode. So I thought that was kind of a good tip that, just to try to push yourself using the tools that you already have.
I love it.
If you don't have a bike computer, you could try doing it with time. You could say, I normally take 5 minutes to climb this hill. Can I do it in 4? Can I do it in 4 minutes and 30 seconds? You can do it that way too if you don't have your bike computer. I guess one more tip that I want to throw in there, it's not a little bit out of order, but I talked earlier about doing dog walks as cross training. Try to do cross training. Try to expand your physical fitness in other ways besides cycling because it'll keep things fresh. It'll keep it more interesting. But actually, if you work out the rest of your body, it can help prepare you. So I looked it up online. It says that arm and core strength can also help you because just sort of keeping correct posture on the bike helps. Don't skip that arm day. Everyone always says don't skip leg day. Cyclists, don't skip arm day. But I've also heard that squats and lunges can be good additions to bike training. Not that I would necessarily know that, but it seems to make sense where you're sort of helping. That would work more of the similar muscles that you use while cycling, but just in a little bit different way a little bit more formal way than a bike ride necessarily would.
And then have a good friend like me and AP when we rode together. There were times when we were, we asked each other, so we had permission, but to tell each other to either, be more, make your back straight, or what did we keep telling each other? Oh, your shoulders down.
Yeah. Yep.
We kept telling each other to put our shoulders down. So, day 1 versus day 7, we were pros by the end of the week.
That's right. Relax your shoulders. And I do think that if I had more ab strength, my posture would have been better on the bike. And maybe help me keep a more comfortable, relaxed posture while I was doing that. But I guess you'll find out on the real ride. But overall, I think persistence is your key. You're not going to be the queen of the hills after 1 or even 3 training sessions. You just got to keep going. You want to be a queen of the hills in a month and a half. So just keep chipping away. I see a lot of people on the RAGBRAI social medias that are sharing their training photos, which is really cool. But I just want to remind you that you're building towards something. Like I said, your bike muscles will stay with you year after year, but you got to build them in the first place. So,
yeah, yep. And just overall, I don't recall any hills besides Snake Alley, which was an optional, ride up. I don't recall any hills where I questioned my decision to ride across Iowa. There was not a time when I was like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? There were so many that were true Iowa rollers where if you get some speed going down, then you get, a fourth of the way up or half of the way up before, you have to really start pedaling. So you get like a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Other RAGBRAI routes, we've had hills where I feel like I might throw up when I get to the top.
Right.
We didn't have it this year where it was like that. I think the first 2 40-mile days really get you in condition to tackle the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And I'll say for me, there have been times we get to Burlington and I'm like, I don't think I can do Snake Alley. But this year I felt like all the hills had prepared me and I was excited to take on the challenge of riding that hill.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it was really fun. I feel great about the accomplishment. Highly recommend it. Everybody should try riding Snake Alley.
And if you don't know what Snake Alley is, please, at the end of this podcast, Google it because it's a really cool, it's an iconic road in actually the world.
Yeah, and it is literally a block from the dip site, so you're not really going that far off route. Mm-hmm. It might even be on the route. I'm not sure. All right, so this is a good time to kind of transition and point out that while you're riding these hills, it can be easy to only focus on the hills and sort of let safety slip. So this is a reminder to say, focus on your safety and other safeties around you. It'll probably be really crowded on RAGBRAI at times. And there'll be, at least at a minimum, there will be other cyclists around you. And it's really important to stay to the right as much as possible while you're riding. We don't just call it ride right for fun. It's really a true thing that you need to try to do. If you're slower than the people that are around you, stay to the right. If you're faster, you can pass on the left side, call out on your left. But for the most part, try to stay over to the right as far as possible until you start passing slower riders.
Yeah, for sure. Call out your intentions and think of yourself as a vehicle because you are. So if you're going to pass somebody, do not pass them on the right because who knows if that person is, getting over to the right because they're going to stop, they're going to get off, whatever. So just like a vehicle, you pass on the left if you're faster.
Yeah, think about when you're driving on the interstate and somebody passes you on the right side, you say to yourself, what an idiot, what are they doing? It's the exact same on a bike. That's exactly how the mindset is. So if it helps to think about that way, that's a good way to do it. The other one, I know I said this during the pre-ride, but make sure that you practice riding in a straight line. It's much easier to predict what a cyclist is going to do if they're in a steady straight line. And Murph is the queen of riding in a straight line. She is rock solid on that straight line.
You.
So kudos to you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just really helpful. And I do know that riding up a hill, it can be difficult to stay in a straight line, but that's why you practice now. The other pre-ride tip that I had that I want to bring back is that there can be cracks in the road a lot of times that run parallel with how we're riding, and they can be extremely dangerous for cyclists, especially when they fill them in with tar because it's deceptive. It looks like it's full, but tar is squishy and asphalt is not. And it's the same color as asphalt a lot of times. So you just have to keep an eye out for it, avoid it at all costs. And I think usually when you get on a road with cracks, you generally stay on a road with cracks. So it'll be something that you see a lot of, but make sure that you're calling it out every single time that you see a crack because you never know when the bike behind you is looking down or looking at the beautiful countryside. You want to make sure that they notice the crack as well.
That center line crack, it isn't everywhere, but it's Iowa, right? There's lots of places where the way that the roads are made, that there is a center line that expands because we have all seasons here in Iowa. And sometimes if your tires are really skinny, that it can get stuck in there and terrible injuries can happen. So I I never ride my bike anywhere near that center line. I'm either far to the right, or if I'm passing, I'm far to the left. And I'm even at the point now where I can't ride with people who are near the center line.
Yeah.
Especially if
Yeah.
they're like chit-chatting, or, oh, look at the cornfield over there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I am too stressed out. I can't ride. So
Yeah.
if you're ever like riding with me and you're riding near the center line, you may notice that I ride away from you because I just can't handle it.
Yeah. And for good reason. So, all right. So our next topic is hydration. Murph, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, geez. I know you've yelled at me. Actually, it was on the podcast a while back that I talked about I only take one bottle of water, and I'm terrible at drinking. And so on PreRide, I took 2 bottles, and I actually got called out. Somebody who is a listener, I believe it was Dixon. Thank you, Nick Dixon, for pointing it out, and said, "Wait a minute, I thought Murph only took 1 bottle along on rides." And yes, I took 2. So
Yep. Good for you.
anyway, but I will say I love how the stretches between towns this year are not super long in miles.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity to get more water about every 10 to 15 miles. I think there's a couple stretches that are 20, but there'll be a vendor alongside the road. But as I've said, I'm terrible at drinking water while biking. But here's something cool. So if you happen to have the Wahoo bike computer, there's a neat feature on it. I told you about this, AP, the other day, that you can schedule reminders and you get to make up the reminder. So I set a reminder to take a drink of water every 30 minutes. And so it will beep at me and it will stay on my computer screen until I push dismiss. And so if I'm in a safe place of biking, I can lean, grab my water bottle, take a drink, and push dismiss. If it's a situation where I can't, then I will leave it on the screen until I can reach my water bottle and take a drink.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love it. But
Yeah. Well, see, and it shows even the most experienced riders can get just a little bit better. So
that's right. Yes, I love it. But how about you as far as hydration?
Well, it's really important. And to your point, there are times when you're going up and down hills where it's not safe to drink. So you really do have to make a conscious effort to do it, because not drinking enough water is one of those things that'll sneak up on you and you'll feel bad and you can't quite pinpoint why. And it's a lot of times it's because you're dehydrated. Beyond what you've said, one of the things that helps me is that if I'm riding along and I notice another rider take a drink and I haven't recently, I'll also take a drink. So try to make it a little social situation. And it's a nice way to add in extra hydration, even if you're not thirsty, to take that just one extra sip of water to add it in.
I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, there are towns about every 10 miles, just regularly along the route. And almost all of them will have water filling stations. Mm-hmm. So take advantage of that. Sometimes it's not right at the start of town, so keep your eyes open as you go through town. A lot of times it's dependent on where the fire hydrants are. So just keep your eyes peeled. Occasionally a town will not offer water for one reason or another. So just make sure you have a couple bucks in your bike bag to buy that. Keep your eye out for fire stations, vendors, other kinds of kids along the side of the road. They'll help keep you hydrated.
Yep. There's very few times when I don't think there's ever been a time when I am nervous about running out of water, but I'm different than most people. And, if it's super hot again this year, actually, if it's super hot, hopefully we'll have the same great townspeople. Remember last year how they had sprinklers everywhere and everyone was squirting water at us. So I'm hoping that it'll be similar. Well, actually, no. Let me re-say that, because I do not want it to be that hot again this year, but we don't know. We won't know until we're there.
That's right. Time will tell. And I'll just finish off our little hydration section by saying, actually, Murph's favorite tip about hydration, which is that right before you go to bed, make sure you drink a glass full of an electrolyte drink like a Gatorade or a Noon tablet, which is our favorite, or something like that, just to kind of get your juices rehydrating overnight while you're sleeping.
Yep.
So, and it is important to mix in those salt tablets of whatever kind is your preference, to make sure that you're balancing out just all drinking water only. So, all right. So my last topic for this episode is the bike.
Ooh, okay.
I know. So we talked about getting your person ready for the pre-ride, getting your person ready in shape. Now we talk about the bike. I guess I'll start by saying the weight of the bike that you have, it matters. do you need to carry in your training? You probably have all sorts of gear. You might have panniers, you might have bike bags, plural. Do you really need all that gear? Think about that as you head into RAGBRAI. Of course, you are sort of self-contained as you're out there. You need to have a certain amount of stuff, but are there ways that you could slim down what you're carrying with you on your bike? I mean, don't skimp on water bottles, Murph, but do you need 9 tire irons, or could you get away with just having 3 tire irons?
Well, and I will say, if anybody looks at photos of RAGBRAI's past, I am the queen of gear, but
Yeah.
I also train that way. Like my
Yes.
intention is to be on my steel frame bike with my panniers. I used to be self-contained, which meant I had all my clothing and my camping gear and everything on my bike, but that's not normal, or is it really? It's not necessary. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And this year I did not do that. And I was very mindful of, do I need, like what you said, do I need all of this stuff to change a tire when there, for us, we had a support vehicle following us. So, or did I need 2 rain jackets when really you only wear 1 at a time?
Yeah. Well, and I just hear a lot of new riders saying things like, oh, well, I'm going to use the baggage service, but I'm still going to try to be self-contained. That's not something you need to do on this RAGBRAI with a lot of hills, especially if you don't have experience. If you're an experienced cyclist and you know what you're getting into, that's one thing. But you're already registered. You already have access to our baggage service. Just use it and put your heavy stuff up to 50 pounds on the baggage trailer so that you don't have to carry it with you. It'll be right there waiting for you when you come back. This is also my time to talk about e-bikes. They're a really great tool, especially if they can help you ride RAGBRAI when you otherwise couldn't. But make sure that e-bike can do an 80-mile day on the charge that you have prepared for it. An 80-mile hilly day. If you can't make the charge, do you have a plan for charging it? And if you don't have a plan for charging it, are you able to muscle that super heavy bike up all the hills that we have ahead of us? I need you to consider that when you're bringing your e-bike, because they're very difficult to put on the sag wagons. I know they might not admit that to you. But they're extremely heavy, and our equipment is made for regular road bikes. So obviously you're welcome to bring an e-bike. I don't want to discourage that, especially for people who really need are helped greatly by having an e-bike. I just want you to make sure that you have planned appropriately for bringing it with you.
Right. And if you have a support crew, like let's say, you and your spouse are taking turns driving the vehicle route intersects with the meat town, or, we call it the lunch town. And so that might be an opportunity to switch out a battery.
Yeah.
But the vehicle route does not intersect with any of the other towns. So
correct.
It's not like you can have your spouse, come meet you in an hour down the road, because we try not to mix bikes with vehicles.
Yeah. First of all, it's annoying. It's dangerous. It's just not logistically possible in a lot of places. I say this as someone whose job it is to approach the route in a vehicle. I would never in a million years cross it in a vehicle. It's just not safe. So yeah, just plan ahead. If you have an e-bike, do some tests where you ride a full 80 miles on hills so you know what you're in for. If you don't have an e-bike and this is your first RAGBRAI and you have multiple bikes, this might be the year where you bring your carbon bike or your aluminum bike instead of your beautiful steel bike. I love steel bikes the most, that, but you want to be carrying as little weight as possible if you're not experienced with hills.
Are you saying this directly to me right now?
Well, you brought your carbon bike.
I was going to say, it's great advice, because I did leave my steel beauty at home and I rode my carbon bike, and I am very, very glad I did.
Yeah, I did too. And maybe I'll bring my steel Teasdale out on the flat RAGBRAI that we do a couple years down the road. I'm not saying never bring it. I'm just saying maybe this isn't the year. So think about the weight of your belongings that you're bringing with you on the bike, because it does make a difference. Speaking to your bike, if you haven't been fitted on your bike before, go ahead and take it to your local bike shop, take it to your Shields, get a bike fit. It actually helps a lot with climbing efficiency. Just make it easier on yourself. If your bike's fitted properly, you can bike more easily. Just simple physics. Kind of along with that, this will be my last tip of today as far as I have planned. Make sure your bike's in good working order. This one kind of came to light for me because we had a couple rainy days on the pre-ride and all the grease came off my chain. And I didn't bring any extra grease because usually I just get grease all over myself. But that is one thing that I wish I would have packed in my suitcase. Maybe not necessarily even on the bike with me, but grease for my chain. So make sure your chain is greased. Make sure your tires are pumped up to the proper inflation level. And as a reminder to you new riders, WD-40 is not a lubricant. It strips the lubricant off of your bike. So do not use WD-40 to grease your chain. Use like a real chain grease or a chain oil.
And I'll add to that, while you're checking, your chain and making sure your tires are pumped up, also make sure those brakes are working because
Oh, great one.
We grind up those hills and then you have the opportunity to go fast if you want to down those hills, but you got to make sure your brakes work so that if you have bike traffic ahead of you or, maybe you see some potholes, you got to make sure you can stop your bike.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope this kind of long rundown of all these tips that came to mind to me during the pre-ride help you as you're preparing for RAGBRAI, the big kahuna. We'll obviously be peppering our episodes between now and the ride with more safety tips, more advice for riders, but this is sort of our big download of all the top tips that came to mind as we were riding across the state earlier this month. If you have a tip that you'd like to share with other riders, why don't you send it to us at justgobikepodcast@gmail.com or on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at justgobikepodcast. We love hearing from you. I'd love to hear your tips, or if you'd like to hear advice about any topic regarding cycling, you know how to get a hold of us. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks AP for letting me be on ParrotTalk today.
Yeah, anytime. It was my treat. All right, listeners, that's it for today's episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Bike podcast. Murph and AP will be back next week. In the meantime, check us out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And if you would like to contact Murph and AP with a comment about the podcast, or maybe you have a topic in mind, email them at justgobikepodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, especially if you're a fan. Until next time,
just go bike!
Theme song by Ryan Steer, logo by Suzanne Milosevic, produced by Kathy Murphy, social media by Andrea Parrott, intro by Pumpkin. Until next time, just go bike.